Today we're going to talk about how to dress warmly for winter photography. So you've probably seen some of my videos where I'm out photographing waterfalls in the snow, or I'm out photographing frozen waterfalls, and you're probably thinking, wow, it must be cold out there. Well, so today I thought it'd be a good time to go over some of the gear I wear out on those cold winter days to stay warm while I'm out there photographing things. And really, as a photographer, we're sort of a tricky situation because we're usually hiking in, so like athletic wear, things that would work for things like that, that's good for that portion of the trip. But then when you get to where you're going, you tend to stand there for 45 minutes, an hour, sometimes more, taking pictures and things like that, and you're sitting still. So it's actually somewhat of a hard mix of activities. You're doing some active hiking to get to where you're going outdoors, and then once you get there, you stand around and wait. But the setup I use when I go out, I stay warm. I'm almost never cold when I go. So, I thought it'd be helpful to go through and take a look at this. Now, this isn't a true gear review video. This is more of an overview of what I wear when I go outside. So there's just a couple things to keep in mind with that. One, people's warmth levels vary. I stay fairly warm most of the time. If I wear a hat, I can almost always stay warm. And there's other people that can be on the very same trip with me and they just can't get warm. Like, for example, I could put my wife in every single one of these and she would be cold. Like, there's just no way around it. So keep in mind, your warmth levels may vary. So I think this is a good strategy on dressing, but you might need a warmer layer than I might have in here. I think the layer approach is important and that's the way you want to go. But where I have a thinner layer, you might want a heavier layer if you're prone to getting cold. Don't get too hung up on the brands of things I mention here. I'm going to mention brands, but really, if you have a favorite brand, go with that. More expensive doesn't always mean better, especially for some of the situations we're in. So, don't get too hung up on that. I'm going to mention it, but you don't need to go seek out this exact piece of gear, piece of equipment to stay warm. Pay more attention to the layering approach, what I'm using in each layer, and sort of how it functions. And then choose your favorite brand, choose what fits, choose what feels good, and go from there. The other note is, I've talked about how people vary in cold. I am an Ohio-based photographer. Most of my wintertime photography is based in Ohio. What that means to me is if it's single digits or higher, this stuff all will tend to keep me warm. This is pretty much what I would go out in, from single digits all the way up. Certain conditions could change that. Super high winds that I can't get out of, that might change what I wear. I might add a wind shell or something like that. Most of the time I'm in the woods or some sheltered area, so it can be single digits, but I'm not standing out in the middle of this big wide open field being windy. So keep in mind where you're at. If you live in Alaska, I think the layer approach still works, but you're probably gonna want thicker and heavier layers than what I've got. And finally, I am approaching this from a landscape photographer where a lot of times what I do is I drive to a place, I park, I have a mile or two hike into somewhere, I hang out and photograph for an hour or two, make a mile or two hike back out and back to the car. I'm never like 10 miles from civilization, 20 miles from civilization. If one of my pieces of gear was to fail or I was to get cold, I'm like a 1.5 mile, 2 mile walk probably from the car in most cases. So there are times when you're doing some wild, crazy expedition, most of this should probably be upgraded in something different. But for the type of landscape photography I do in the situations I find myself in, this all keeps me warm, but I'm also typically not ever super far from warmth should I get too cold. So keep that in mind. So with that, let's dive into it. So I'm big on the layers approach to dressing for the cold. And so with that in mind, I start with a base layer. This is what I start with. This right here is pants and a top. They're thin layers. They're what hits my skin. They are made by a company called 32 Degrees, and they have a heat line and a cold line. I get them at Costco. These are like 2 packs, 2 shirts for 10 bucks, 2 pants for 10 bucks. Like, that's it. These aren't super name brand technical clothing, but this is what I start with. This is what's underneath my shirts and my pants and everything like that. And it's just a nice, warm, thin base layer just to get my first layer started. So next up from the base layers, we'll move into the pants. And this is what I wear for pants. It's made by a company called BC Clothing. I got them at Costco. Unfortunately, they're actually sort of hard to find now, so I still have several pairs I bought when I found them at Costco and use them for that. They got a little bit of a shell, they're not waterproof by any means, but it's got a little bit of shell just to shed a little bit of water, snow, things like that. They've got a polyester lining inside just for an extra layer, so they're relatively thick pants. Lots of cargo pockets, great for lens caps and everything like that. With the base layer in these pants mixed together, I've never really had a problem with my legs getting cold. If you watched my snow waterfall video, you probably would have saw snow all up and down my pant legs and things like that, and it didn't really get through or anything like that. I stayed plenty warm in these pants. Like I said, and I like the cargo pants when I'm out photographing just because it's tons of pockets. So those are the pants I wear, BC clothing. And really, I think it boils down to just sort of a warm lining with weatherish, WeatherTech type exterior, just to sort of shed water and snow and things like that. Moving up from there, I do toss on just a quick technical tee. This is a Glacier technical tee. It's another Costco special. Like it was a 2-pack for probably like 12 bucks or something like that. I like it. It's not cotton. So if, again, when we talked about the trials and tribulations of a photographer, you're hiking in, well, you might get a little warm and you might start to sweat. Then you're gonna stand still. Well, in pure cotton, that's not a good thing. That leads to bad conditions. So this, you at least want this to be a technical piece of wear that's not cotton, that helps wick the moisture away from your body so it can keep you warm. But it's just t-shirt, short sleeve. So what I'm trying to accomplish with this is keep my chest warm. That's why it's short sleeve. My other layers help keep my arms warm, but I always try to layer up on my torso because I find that helps keep me warm in the long run. Continuing, moving up, I do wear a fleece vest. This one happens to be an Eddie Bauer that I have with me right now. I've got a North Face one. Key being, again, I'm trying to keep my chest, torso, my core body warm. So I tend to layer heavily there because I don't like to be super bulky. And if I start doing long sleeves all the way, I can't move. I'm like Marshmallow Man. So, but I put a vest on, it helps keep me warm. Like I said, this is just an Eddie Bauer fleece vest. Name brand's not particularly important, I don't think. Then I get up into an actual fleece jacket. This is a Patagonia. You know, technically warmth-wise, I think a lot of things are pretty comparable. Patagonia, it just lasts forever, so I like the Patagonia for that. So, you know, I've got, what we're at now is I've had a base layer, technical tee, a fleece vest, and now I'm into an actual fleece. Again, this one starts to get my arms, so I get some extra, this is where I start getting into my arm warmth and things like that, and it keeps my chest warm. So this is what I go into. This will get me through a lot. This will get me through like 40-degree weather and things like that, no problem. Maybe upper 30s as well, and I could almost stop there. But for my really cold stuff, the snowy days, the frozen waterfalls days, we move on up into a down jacket. This is an REI Strato Cloud. It does have a hood. I'm not a huge fan of hoods. Anyone who knows me knows I'm not a huge fan of hoods. But when you're outdoors, this is my top layer. It's a pretty lightweight hood. It doesn't bother me too much. This is super warm. This is the key to it all, really. And really, this is an REI one. I always like their stuff, moderately priced, reasonable performance. Again, you could get in the Marmot, Patagonia, North Face, whatever. But again, layer-wise, sort of a down jacket up here is what's important. And this provides me tremendous amounts of warmth. If you watch through some of my videos, you'll see that I'm actually walking around with my coat unzipped and the fleece unzipped because I'm staying that warm even while I'm standing around photographing things. That's my top layers. That takes me all the way through it. It's quite a bit on top, but it keeps me warm through all of that. That sort of covers the clothing as far as, you know, the pants, the top, and how I stay warm. And like I said, that keeps me warm pretty much from the single digits in Ohio all the way, you know, up from there. Adding on to that, let's cover feet. I wear smart wool socks, nice and simple, one layer. I do usually throw extra pairs in the car. Like I said, a lot of my stuff's 1 or 2 miles away, so that way when I get back to the car, if I have wet feet, cold feet, I can put on a dry pair of socks. But these are just smart wool socks, hiking socks, so, and they've worked out really well. So, and then to finish things off on the feet is I do wear these Keen Targhee 3 hiking boots. They're sort of a mid-height boot, waterproof, nice little toe cap because I tend to kick things as I'm sort of a lazy hiker where my feet kick and bump into rocks, so I like nice sturdy soles, and that's what these have. Like I said, these are waterproof. You've seen that in some videos where I've actually walked into nearly frozen creeks, and as long as it doesn't go above the ankle, I'm good. And these have done fine to keep my feet warm. Really, I think in conjunction with the socks, that's a pretty winning combination, but never really had any cold feet issues. I do have an old pair of hiking boots I keep in the car if I know I'm going out into the snow and things like that, because again, if I do get back to the car and my feet happen to be cold, or as things start to melt in the heat of the car, which is where things can really get cold, I have a spare set with me. So, but these are the ones that are my daily goers. Hands are always a big thing with photographers, because again, this is one of those weird areas. We want our hands to be warm, but to work our camera controls, I don't care if they say they're touch screens or not, you still got little knobs you want to change and adjust and move, and that can be hard with gloved hands. And I still don't have the perfect glove solution, but what I have works. It's just, there's probably some room for improvement. So let's take a look. I actually tend to take 2 sets of gloves out with me. First are these head waterproof hybrid gloves, you know, 5 fingers, not super thick, but not super thin either. These are what I tend to use while I'm actually hiking. So it sort of gives my hands a chance to warm up, you know, slip them on. They're waterproof, so if they get in the snow, it's fine. They're not gonna get, you know, anything with that. So these tend to be what I wear while I'm hiking. But once the camera comes out, I do one of two things. I either will just take the glove off and hold it while I adjust the camera, shove it in a pocket and just go barehanded, or I will use these wool fingerless gloves. These are just wool fingerless gloves. They've got the little grippies here. You know, they keep my hands warm, my fingers are exposed, so I can run my camera controls, no problems with that. One of the things with keeping your hands warm is you gotta keep the back of your hand where the blood flows warm. So with these fingerless gloves, you just toss them on, my fingers are out, the back of my hand is warm. If there's some wind or something like that, I can keep them good. You know, there are times when I've been running the camera for quite a while, my fingertips do get cold, and then what happens is I take those off, switch back into my head gloves, give my hands a chance to warm up and go from there. It seems silly to carry 2 sets of gloves on the trail. It works for me. I'm still looking for the perfect solution. Next, I'll probably try mittens with a folding top or something like that. But this works, keeps my hands warm, but it does mean carrying 2 sets of gloves out into the field. And finally, top it all off, and this is the absolute must-have, is a hat, knit hat of some sort. This is a Patagonia fleece, which I've actually owned for over 20 years. Love this hat. So if there's anything I've learned over the years of hiking around and out in the cold and stuff like that, is the key pieces for me are keeping my torso warm and keeping my head warm. So a hat is a must-have for me. If I can have a hat on, I can handle some pretty extreme cold even without a ton of layers and things like that. So always make sure I have a good hat. A lot of times I even have a spare hat in the car, things like that. But this is a Patagonia fleece hat. Again, brands aren't important. This thing lasts forever. Like I said, 20 plus years old, amazing hat. And it's my go-to. That is key to keeping warm. So I hope you found this overview of wintertime clothing gear useful for how I keep warm doing photography out there in the snow and tracking down frozen waterfalls and things like that. Like I said, I think the key elements to it are layers. Clothing brand isn't so important in my opinion. Like I said, I have a fair amount of Costco gear in here. I do have some high-end technical gear, but really the name brand is not so important. I think the layers is. Also knowing how you function in the cold. I already noted if I keep my torso and head warm, then I'm warm, so my legs don't need quite as much. You may find that you need to make sure your feet and legs are warm and the rest of you be warm, so you might want to tweak some of this so that you have more layers for your legs than what I do. But this is it. This is what keeps me warm. So if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. And if you want to see future landscape photography content from me, which include mini gear reviews like this, behind the scenes, and tips and tricks, then please hit that subscribe button. That way you don't miss any future landscape photography content from me. And thank you for watching.